A girl accepted a worthless piece of land as a joke when she was 11 years old, and spent the next 3 years watching a multi-million-dollar steel empire quietly build itself around the one thing only she controlled. This is what patience looks like when nobody believes in you. The call came in at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning, and Brent Calloway was already sweating through his collar before he finished dialing. 17 contracts. Frozen. A $4.2 million development site, completely blocked at the zoning gate. No legal path forward. No clean workaround. And at the center of all of it, a deed in the name of an 11-year-old girl who had never asked for it, never paid for it, and never once come looking to sell. Brent needed to talk to Victor Hale. Victor Hale did not like being called before 8. 3 years before Brent Calloway made that call, there was a county auction in a converted grain hall with folding tables and a coffee pot nobody had cleaned since Easter. The fluorescent lights hummed. 4 locals sat in the back. A cardboard sign taped to the wall said County Surplus, lots 40 through 52. Lot 47 was not exciting. It was a formal filing, a county deed transferring industrial waste handling rights over a narrow, 0.8-acre corridor beside the east fence line of the old Harwick steel mill site. The mill had been closed for 9 years. The land was wedged between a rusted gate and a gravel access road. Nobody had filed a use claim on the corridor in over a decade. Victor Hale owned those rights through a subsidiary called Ridgeline Holdings, LLC. He had paid $300 for them in 2011. He had done nothing with them since. When the auctioneer called Lot 47 and not a single paddle went up, Victor pushed back from his folding chair and looked around the room. That was when he saw Sable Voss. She was 11 years old. She was standing beside her grandfather in a coat 2 sizes too big, holding a cup of hot chocolate that had long gone cold. She was reading the auction sheet with the focused expression of someone checking their math. Victor walked to the clerk's table. He signed the transfer card himself. He had it stamped. He handed it across the aisle and said it loud enough for the whole room to hear. Somebody ought to get some use out of this. She's welcome to it. 2 of the 4 locals in the back laughed. The auctioneer moved on. Victor Hale sat back down and poured himself a cup of cold coffee, satisfied with his own joke. Sable did not laugh. She looked at the transfer card. She read every line. She read the parcel number, 0.8 acres, East Corridor, formerly held by Ridgeline Holdings, LLC. She read the filing date. She read the reference codes in the bottom right corner. Her grandfather, a quiet man named Earl Voss, who had spent 31 years in industrial logistics, looked down at the card in her hand. He said nothing. Sable folded the card in half. She handed it to Earl, and he put it in his coat pocket. They drove home without discussing it. That night, Sable sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a pencil. Her mother, Diane, was washing dishes at the sink. She glanced over once. She did not ask what Sable was writing. Sable wrote down the parcel number. She wrote down the reference codes from the bottom of the transfer card. She wrote East Fence Line. She wrote Harwick Steel. She wrote 1956. Then she underlined 1956 twice and set her pencil down. Earl came downstairs at 6 the next morning and found Sable already at the table with the legal pad and a glass of orange juice. He sat across from her. She looked up and said, "I need to go to the library." He said, "I figured." Earl Voss had spent 3 decades watching things get built and dismantled. He knew what old roads looked like on a county map. He had mentioned the Harwick site once, at dinner, 2 weeks ago, the East Access Road that the county had planned to expand in the 1950s, before the project was canceled. He had said it like it was nothing, a footnote, old news. But Sable had written it down. She always wrote things down. Victor Hale drove out of the county that afternoon without a second thought about Lot 47. He had a development meeting in the city. He had 11 active projects. He had a 4th-floor office with floor-to-ceiling glass and a view of the river. He did not think about the girl. He did not think about the coat pocket. He did not think about the filing codes on the bottom of the transfer card, or what a person might find if they pulled the 1956 county commissioner records that had never been digitized, scanned, or cross-referenced in any online database. Nobody had ever pulled those records. Nobody had ever thought to. Sable Voss finished her orange juice. She turned the legal pad to a clean page and wrote one more thing before bed, a single question she planned to answer at the library on Thursday. Nobody in the room at that auction had any idea what she was looking for. She was 11 years old. She had been handed a piece of land as a punchline, and she already knew it wasn't one. Before you find out what Sable discovered in those dusty county files, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what she found buried in a 1956 filing is something nobody in that auction room could have dreamed of. Don't go anywhere. A Thursday in October, the County Public Library. A beige filing cabinet with a drawer that stuck. Sable was 12 by then. She had been back to that cabinet 4 times. She came after school, set her backpack on the reading table, and asked the librarian, a woman named Mrs. Fenn who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, for the 1950s zoning rolls and the county commissioner meeting minutes from 1954 through 1958. Mrs. Fenn didn't ask why. She just pointed to the cabinet. The records were not organized. They were filed by year, then by meeting date, then by topic. Loosely, in manila folders with handwritten labels that had faded to near nothing. Sable worked through them in order, folder by folder, page by page. She did not rush. Most of the records were about road drainage, fence line disputes, livestock permits. Then she found the folder labeled Eastern Corridor, Road Expansion Proposal 1955 to 1958. She sat down. She read. The plan had been straightforward. The county wanted to expand Road 7 eastward, which meant acquiring a strip of land running along the Harwick Steel property line. The mill had agreed to the survey. The adjacent lot owners had been notified. But in March 1958, the expansion was canceled. Budget cuts. The road never got built. The cancellation resolution was 1 page. Dry language, official stamp. But stapled behind it was a second document. A county commissioner filing dated June 1956, issued before the cancellation, granting permanent residual use rights over the mill's waste handling corridor to the adjacent property holder as compensation for the easement the county had planned to take. Permanent, in perpetuity. The adjacent property, the 0.8-acre lot beside the east fence line of the Harwick Steel site, Lot 47. Sable read the filing 3 times. She borrowed Mrs. Fenn's pencil. She wrote down the filing number, the date, the exact language used in the grant. She wrote down the names of the 2 commissioners who signed it. She put the folder back exactly as she found it. She walked home in the cold with her backpack over one shoulder and her legal pad pressed flat against her chest. The kitchen table that night had a kettle on the stove and a half-finished grocery list pushed to one side. Sable spread her notes out flat and drew a map on a piece of graph paper. She drew the mill. She drew the east fence line. She drew the 0.8-acre corridor running alongside it. She wrote 1956 in a small box in the corner and drew a circle around it. Then she drew an arrow from the corridor outward, pointing east, pointing toward the county road, pointing toward the direction any truck would have to travel to legally move steel waste off the mill site without crossing private land. The arrow ran directly through the 0.8-acre lot, through Lot 47, through her parcel. Diane came in from the hallway and stopped when she saw the map. She said, "Is that the land from the auction?" Sable said, "Yes." Diane looked at the map for a long time. She didn't sit down. She said, "What does it mean?" Sable said, "It means anyone who needs to use that corridor has to go through us first." Diane looked at her daughter. Then she put the kettle on. Sable bought a blue spiral notebook at the dollar store the next Saturday. $1.19 with tax. She wrote East Corridor on the front, in marker, and put the graph paper map inside the front cover, folded flat. Over the following months, she watched. Not dramatically, not obviously. She rode her bike past the Harwick site twice a week on the way to school. She noticed the survey flags that appeared in February. Small orange markers pushed into the frozen ground along the east fence line. She noticed the tire tracks that showed up in the mud in April, from trucks heavier than anything the county road crew drove. She noticed the LLC name stenciled on the side of a pickup parked near the gate, Ridgeline Holdings. She wrote it all down. Dates, vehicle descriptions, how many trucks, which direction they came from. In May, she went back to the county clerk's office, the public records window on the ground floor, and asked for recent property transfer filings in the Harwick area. The clerk handed her a printout. She took it to the library and compared the parcel numbers to her map. Over 14 months, Victor Hale's Ridgeline Holdings had quietly purchased 6 adjacent parcels, 4 to the north, 2 to the south, 280 acres total. Every parcel touching the mill site from every direction but one. The one direction they didn't own was east. East was the corridor. East was the 0.8-acre strip of land transferred to Sable Voss, age 11, as a joke at a county auction with folding tables and a coffee pot nobody cleaned. Earl found her at the kitchen table one evening that summer, staring at the map with the notebook open beside it. 6 columns of LLC transactions, 14 months of tire track dates, 1 circled parcel number. He looked over her shoulder. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "So they can't move a single load of steel waste off that site without crossing your strip." Sable didn't look up. She said, "Not legally." Earl put his hand on the back of her chair. He said, "Does Victor Hale know that?" Sable closed the notebook. She said, "Not yet." The trap was not dramatic. It was not loud. It was a 1956 document in a sticky drawered filing cabinet that nobody had read in 66 years. A $1.19 spiral notebook and a 12-year-old girl who paid attention. Victor Hale had 280 acres and a $4.2 million development plan. He was missing 0.8. And somewhere in a filing cabinet in a county library, the paperwork proved exactly why those 0.8 acres were the only thing that mattered. Sable shut off the kitchen light. The map sat on the table in the dark. Everything was already in place. The knock came on a Saturday in September, which was not unusual for salespeople, but was unusual for a man in a gray suit carrying a leather portfolio. He introduced himself before the door was fully open. His name was Preston Lyle. He worked for a property acquisition firm retained by a private developer. He smiled the way people smile when they're confident the number they're about to say will end the conversation quickly. He said, "We'd like to offer you $9,000 for the East Corridor parcel." Sable was 13. She had been mowing that strip twice a year since the auction. She had paid the annual tax bill of $47 every April without fail. She had never put a sign on it, never fenced it, never done anything to it that would attract attention. She looked at Preston Lyle and said, "No thank you." He blinked. She closed the door. Earl was in the kitchen. He looked up from his coffee when she came back. Sable said, "First one." She opened the blue notebook to a new page and wrote the date, Preston Lyle's name, the firm he worked for, and the number, $9,000. She underlined it. Then she closed the notebook and finished her breakfast. 6 months after Preston Lyle's visit, a letter arrived from the County Development Office. Official letterhead, a reference number at the top, formal language, the kind that sounds larger than it is. The county had an interest in acquiring certain corridor easement rights as part of a regional infrastructure review. They were prepared to offer $24,000 in compensation. Sable read the letter twice. She turned it over, nothing on the back. She wrote back in 2 sentences. She wrote that she appreciated the county's interest and that she was declining. She mailed it the same day. She added the letter to a manila folder she kept between the notebook and the map. She wrote offers on the tab in marker, with the date. Diane found the folder one evening and set it on the kitchen table without opening it. She said, "How many is that now?" Sable said, "2." Diane nodded. She did not ask what Sable was waiting for. She had understood from the beginning, not all of the details, but the shape of it. She had watched her daughter ride past the Harwick site twice a week for a year. She had seen the notebook fill up. She knew the difference between a girl with a plan and a girl with a guess. Diane put the kettle on. She said, "You'll know when it's time." Sable said, "I'll know." 14 months after the letter from the county, a man in a 3-piece suit knocked on the front door on a Wednesday afternoon. His name was Roland Fitch. He set a leather briefcase on the porch railing and introduced himself as General Counsel for Consolidated Industrial Partners. He asked if he could come in. Sable poured him a cup of coffee at the kitchen table. He opened his briefcase. He set a single page on the table. A clean offer letter with a number printed at the bottom in a font that was slightly larger than the rest of the text. The number was $185,000. He said, "We believe this reflects the fair market value of the parcel and then some. We're prepared to close within 30 days. Sable wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. She said, "No." Roland Fitch looked at the cup. He looked at the notebook on the edge of the table. He looked at Sable, who was 14 years old and had not blinked once since he sat down. He said, "Miss Voss, the development on this site is a significant regional project. It will create employment. It has county support." Sable said, "I understand." He said, "The parcel has no productive use as it currently sits." Sable said, "I disagree." Roland Fitch picked up his offer letter. He put it back in the briefcase. He drank the rest of his coffee, because declining free coffee felt like a concession he wasn't ready to make. He left without saying goodbye. Sable added the number to the notebook. $9,000, $24,000, $185,000. 3 offers in 20 months, each one larger, each one refused without drama or explanation. She did not feel righteous about it. She did not feel clever. She felt the same way she had felt at the library, reading the 1956 filing for the 3rd time, focused, clear. She turned to a fresh page and wrote the date. She wrote Roland Fitch's name. She wrote Consolidated Industrial Partners. She wrote 3 words below it. "They're getting nervous." She was right about that. 3 floors up in a building 2 counties over, Victor Hale was not having a good week. The East Corridor filing was now sitting on his lawyer's desk. 6 different approaches to the problem had been mapped and discarded. The project financing was contingent on full site access. The timeline was slipping. 2 investors had asked uncomfortable questions at the last call. Victor Hale stood at the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the river and said nothing for a long time. His lawyer said, "We may have an abandonment argument." Victor said, "Use it." Sable's daughter, Nora, came home from college that fall for a long weekend. She was 19. She sat at the kitchen table on Sunday morning while Sable made eggs. Nora picked up the notebook. She flipped through the pages slowly. She said, "How long have you been tracking this?" Sable said, 3 years in April." Nora turned to the graph paper map at the front. She studied the arrow pointing east through the 0.8-acre strip. She said, "Have you thought about what happens if they claim you abandoned it?" Sable cracked an egg. She said, "I've thought about it." Nora set the notebook down. She looked at her mother. She said, "I'm going to take a property law elective next semester." Sable did not react to that outwardly. She slid eggs onto a plate and set it in front of her daughter. But she wrote it down later. Nora, property law elective, spring semester. She underlined it. On a Tuesday morning in March, the phone rang. Sable was at the kitchen table. The blue notebook was open. The coffee was hot. She looked at the screen. Unfamiliar number, out-of-county area code. She knew who it was. She set the notebook down flat. She picked up the phone. Roland Fitch did not say hello. He said, "We're prepared to go to $340,000. Final offer, cash close." Sable let 1 second pass. She said, "That's not why you called." Fitch paused. "A long one." He said, "We filed an abandonment claim with the county. We believe the 1956 corridor rights have legally lapsed under Ordinance 14C. Sable looked at the notebook on the table. She said, "I'll be in touch." She hung up before he finished his next sentence. Nora drove 4 hours on a Friday. She came through the front door with a backpack and a cardboard box of files and set everything on the kitchen table without stopping to take her coat off. She had graduated 6 months earlier. Property law elective. Then 2 additional real estate law courses. Then an internship at a firm that specialized in easement disputes. She had been waiting for this call too, in her own way. She spread the permit file across the table. She laid the original 1956 deed beside it. She put the notebook, 3 years of entries, every offer, every date, every name, to the left of everything else. She read in silence for 40 minutes. Sable made tea and did not interrupt. Nora said, "They filed under Ordinance 14C, non-use abandonment." She turned the ordinance printout around so Sable could see page 4. She put her finger on a single paragraph. She said, "The abandonment provision explicitly exempts easements established by county commissioner filing prior to 1960. Sable said, "I know." Nora looked up. She said, "You've known this the whole time." Sable said, "I needed to know you knew it too." Nora made the phone call. She stood at the kitchen counter with a yellow legal pad and dialed Roland Fitch's office at 9 o'clock Monday morning. She identified herself, stated her bar number, and said 3 sentences. The 1956 filing was exempt under the ordinance's own language. The parcel had been taxed continuously by the county at $47 per year for 63 years, which constituted legal acknowledgement of active status, and she would be filing those tax records, along with the original deed and the commissioner resolution, with the county hearing office by end of day. She said, "If Consolidated Industrial Partners would like to proceed with the abandonment claim, we'll see them at the hearing." Fitch said, "Let's talk about that." Nora said, "We'll talk at the hearing." She hung up. The hearing was in a county conference room with 7 chairs and a water pitcher nobody touched. Roland Fitch brought 2 junior attorneys and a printed stack of precedents. He argued for 22 minutes. He cited case law. He was careful and precise and very composed. Then Nora placed 3 documents on the table. The 1956 County Commissioner filing, the 1958 cancellation resolution with the corridor grant stapled behind it, and 63 years of property tax records, $47 per year, every year, paid on time, never delinquent, which meant the county itself had recognized and taxed the parcel as an active holding every single year of its existence. Nora said, "The county didn't abandon it, they billed for it." The hearing officer looked at the tax records for a long time. He said, "The abandonment claim is denied." Fitch's junior attorney reached for her phone. Victor Hale, sitting in a conference room 2 counties over, read the text she sent him and did not move. 3 days later, Roland Fitch called Nora and said Consolidated Industrial Partners wanted to negotiate terms. Not a sale, not a buyout, terms. Nora called Sable and said, "They folded." Sable said, "What did they offer?" Nora said, "They're asking what you want." What Sable wanted was simple. She had written it in the notebook 18 months earlier, 2 pages after Roland Fitch's $185,000 visit. A permanent easement, monthly payments, indexed to the volume of steel waste moved through the corridor, transferable to her heirs. No expiration date. Fitch pushed back on the indexing. Then on the transferability, Nora said no, then no again, then waited. On the 3rd call, Fitch said, "We accept the terms." The monthly payment was set at $1,400, adjustable every 5 years based on site volume. Over 20 years at minimum projected volume, the corridor rights were worth $2.6 million. Over the life of the steel site, they would pay considerably more. Nora called Sable on a Sunday morning. She said, "It's done, they signed." Sable said, "Thank you, Nora." She heard her daughter pause on the other end. Nora said, "You knew at the auction, didn't you?" Sable said, "I had a feeling." Diane was in the kitchen when Sable came back inside. She did not ask what the call was about. She did not ask about the hearing or the documents or the $340,000 offer that had been refused without a second thought. She just looked at Sable's face. Then she put the kettle on. The signing was at the county clerk's office on a Thursday morning. 1 clerk, 3 documents, a notary stamp. Sable drove herself. She parked the truck on the street. She went inside, signed where indicated, and thanked the clerk by name. On the way back to the truck, she stopped. She opened the glove compartment. She took out the blue notebook, not the second one, or the third, the original, the $1.19 one with the graph paper map inside the front cover. She turned to the last empty page. She wrote, $1,400, permanent, Nora's. Then she wrote one more line below it. He signed the transfer card himself. She closed the notebook. She drove home. The local paper ran a small item 2 weeks later, a brief on the corridor easement agreement, 2 paragraphs, buried on page 7. Victor Hale did not make a comment. His office said he was unavailable. The 4 locals who had been sitting in the back of that grain haul 3 years earlier, who had laughed when he handed the deed to an 11-year-old in an oversized coat. 2 of them read the item. Neither one said anything out loud. That silence was the only apology they had. Some men hand over a piece of land because they think it's worthless, and the person receiving it is too small to matter. Sable Voss kept the receipt, paid the $47 tax bill every April, and waited. The corridor will pay her family long after she's gone, all from a deed Victor Hale signed as a joke and forgot before he got back to his car. Here's the question. If someone handed you that deed, would you have taken the $185,000 offer on the table or held out for the monthly deal that pays forever? Drop your answer below, And if you made it this far, you already know how Sable would have voted.